You've said this many times. Chasing other people's definition of discipline is the least disciplined thing that you can do.
Meet the world's most disciplined man.
Craig Ballantyne, a business coach referred to as the world's most disciplined man.
The world's most disciplined man.
Craig Ballantyne.
Just because you are disciplined in one area of your life doesn't mean that you'll be disciplined in all areas. The greatest, most extreme example of this is Tiger Woods. In 2007 was the world's most disciplined golfer. At the same time, the world's most undisciplined husband. The cool thing to do these days is to say, I do hard things, and post that on the internet, and that goes with your ice bath, etc. Most people don't give it the effort it needs because in most cases, a level 10 problem is pretty scary. And that's the mismatch that causes so much stress and anxiety in our life. We're like kids who need to do their homework and just do a million things to procrastinate on it. And eventually we end up in trouble because the homework isn't done.
The reading the love languages, the making lists, it doesn't sound very sexy. It's not something you can Instagram.
If you're truly about what you're doing for discipline's sake and for your own goal's sake, it's probably not going to go on social media. But here's what we need to do. And I left this out of the book. I totally screwed up, Ginny. The hardest thing of all for human beings to do, and it has been, probably since the dawn of time, is.
So Craig Ballantyne, I'm very excited to have you on The Ginny Show. You've been dubbed the world's most disciplined man. What's the biggest lie you've been sold about discipline?
Oh man, that's a great question. So the biggest lie that I've been sold about discipline, I think, that everyone's been sold about discipline is that just because you are disciplined in one area of your life, that it means you'll be disciplined in all areas of your life. And the reason why this is a big lie that everybody's been sold is because we see so many people doing these internet challenges of discipline, everything from cold plunges to 100 push-ups in 100 days, even reading a book a week. And just because you are disciplined in those things doesn't mean that you'll be disciplined in having hard conversations with your husband or wife or your girlfriend or boyfriend, or you'll be disciplined in having the hard conversations with your business partner or your team members. And the greatest, most extreme example of this is Tiger Woods. So Tiger Woods in 2007 was the world's most disciplined golfer. He was on the range 12 hours a day. He was at the same time the world's most undisciplined husband. Here is a man who was truly the world's most disciplined in a very small niche of golf. And, he was the top of the world. He was number one. And yet he was the worst at being a husband. So it is not a transferable trait. And that's what I think a lot of people get wrong. And that's one of the messages that I'm trying to get through in the book.
What I really enjoy about your kind of unpacking of what discipline is there are a lot of, gimmicks that are sold, especially on routines and, hacks to success. And they're so accessible now with the internet being so democratized and at scale. In your book, you start with a story about Chuck, a guy who's won the internet, but he lost his family. So for you, Craig, I'm wondering, when and how did being too disciplined nearly cost you love, connection, and freedom?
Well, it certainly delayed love, that's for sure. There's a great phrase about books that you have to first live the book in order to write the book. And so I did swing the discipline pendulum way too far for many years. I had an exercise streak of 1,000 days, which, kind of allowed me to use my introverted excuses to avoid social outings. Oh, I got to go and work out, or I don't want to miss my morning workout. And, therefore I can't go to your event. And it really sabotaged me because I was using this as a crutch. And I ended up kind of building a prison of my own making by, having to work out every single day, which was stupid. There's no gold medals for it. It got me no additional benefits to using a much better routine, et cetera. And it held me back from what really mattered in my life, which was going out and meeting my wife, which, fortunately I was able to do that. And, now we have a happy family and all that sort of stuff. But for a long time, it was really a handicap, a ball and chain on me, this extreme discipline and the rigidity in my life, which caused me to miss out on some things that really mattered more.
I remember you saying in the book as well, or you've said this many times in podcasts and your vlogs, that chasing other people's definition of discipline is the least disciplined thing that you can do. How do we know that we're actually doing that?
Well, it's a great question. And so the book is meant to help you figure out a filter through which to run your decisions around, because people might be listening and say, okay, wait a minute, now I'm starting to question my 5 a.m. wake ups or my 6:30 run club or whatever it is. And so we can run it through a very simple filter. That's what I'm all about, is simplicity. And the question that you need to ask yourself about any habit, about any relationship, about anything that you do is this serving me, or am I a servant to it? And if it's serving you, that means that it's making your life better. That first of all, you know exactly what you want to accomplish in your life so that you can make that decision accurately. And so, if you want to be in a great relationship and you want to write a book and you want to build a business that allows you to have control of your time and freedom and still give you enough money to go on some cool vacations, great. That's your North Star. That's exactly where you want to get to. And so you can say, all right, well, I just joined this new 6 a.m. run club. And, usually I like to write my books in the morning. So I'm sacrificing writing my books 4 times a week to go and join this run club. Wait a minute. That sounds like you're serving it, and that new habit is not serving you. So you might be joining it because you see everybody doing the New York Marathon, or you might be doing it because a bunch of your friends are doing it. Well, that's not a good enough reason. The reason needs to be, does it move me in the direction of my big goals and dreams? And if it doesn't, then it's probably not serving you, and you have to, unfortunately, say no to it.
You mentioned too, and I like the example that you gave of simplicity, because one of the books that I read back in my early days of entrepreneurship was the 5 a.m. Club. Now, I've become more of a morning person as my entrepreneur life has grown. But the 5 a.m. Club, the 20-20-20 rule, I think it worked for a period of time. But over time, I realized, okay, I kind of need more focus. And when I came across your millionaire morning routine, one thing that you said was, eat the frog first. Go to your most important tasks of the day and get those done. And that's been working wonders for me. So there are all these things that are out there where, people kind of put their hardest task at the end of the day. They're very resistant to do that. What's the science behind why we avoid the hard problems and obsess over low stake tasks? Is it dopamine, comfort, identity? What do you think it is?
I think that it's definitely that when we're reactive, we're able to get those dopamine hits a whole lot more than when we're proactive and we stick to the course. And so, the quote that you used earlier about eating the frog, it's, originally from Mark Twain, I believe. And it's, if your job is to eat a frog, best thing to do is eat that frog first thing in the morning. If your job is to eat 2 frogs, the best thing to do is eat that biggest frog first. And so, that's the folktale around it. And it holds true because Daniel Pink, in his book, When, the Scientific Perfect Time for Everything, he talks about how we have the greatest discipline, willpower, and intention first thing in the morning. And as the day goes on, those are depletable resources, just like muscle energy in the New York Marathon. You hit the wall at mile 20 in the marathon. And generally, most people hit the wall around 2, 3, 4, or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And they're just like, man, I just can't do this hard thing. And so it gets pushed off to the next day, and it gets pushed off and pushed off and pushed off. Now, on the flip side, if there's something that's easy to do, and you go and do it and you check it off, well, you feel good. So we use this little phrase in the book that the true definition of discipline is putting a level 10 effort into your level 10 problem. And whether that level 10 problem is your marriage, or the fact that you're in $30,000 worth of credit card debt, or whether that you want to write a book, or whether you had this huge opportunity to, go get a new job or to start a business. And, it's a level 10 opportunity. Most people don't give it the effort it needs, because in most cases, a level 10 problem is pretty scary, right? Imagine you were married for 15 years and your relationship had gone cold because you and your husband or wife were really just Uber drivers for your kids. And, your roommates, essentially, you barely get any time with each other. And even though, you buy flowers for them on Valentine's Day or something, the marriage just doesn't have its spark. Man, that's a big problem. And that requires a lot of work. But when you think about, my gosh, it's going to take 6 months or a year before we really get this thing turned around. But, if I go and start a YouTube channel, I can probably get an episode up, tomorrow, and I'll feel good. So we go and put a level 10 effort into a level 1 problem, where we really are just putting a level 1 effort into a level 10 problem. And that's the mismatch that causes so much stress and anxiety in our life, because we're like kids who need to do their homework and just do a million things to procrastinate on it. And eventually we end up in trouble because the homework isn't done.
And we chase that dopamine hit from that instant gratification.
I think so, for sure.
Yeah. Your definition of discipline that you've said, your level 10 effort into your level 10 problem. But your definition of undisciplined is putting a level 10 effort into your level 1 problem, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting too, like, can you walk us through how someone can reverse that and apply the effort to the right thing?
Yeah. First, I'll give you a little story about where I came up with that, because you won't find that definition in any dictionary, obviously. And so for years, between 2010 and 2018, I spoke at an event every year in the fitness industry. So that's where I started my businesses. And I was coaching other fitness experts and personal trainers and gym owners how to grow their businesses. And every year I would go to the event, Ginny, and I'd look out and there, there's James and Johnny and Jesse, and they're all out there and in the same seats as they were last year. And this year they have 8% body fat. They're in such great shape, but they have $8 in their bank account, because they aren't doing the sales and marketing. And so we would stand up there and we teach them sales and marketing all weekend. And then on the breaks, they would go and talk to the other personal trainers about workouts and nutrition. And sure enough, they'd come back next year and I'd look out and there's James and Johnny and Jesse in the same seats. And this year there's 7% body fat, but they got $7 in their bank account. It was just like eye-opening to me. It's like every year you leave here and your level 1 problem is your body fat, but you put a level 10 effort into it because it's the easy way out. It's a path of least resistance. And that's what humans do. And then on the flip side, your level 10 problem is learning how to do sales and marketing, applying the sales and marketing that we teach you so that you get more clients into your gym and you impact their lives and change their lives. And yet you go home and you put the notes on the shelf and you never look at them again. You put a level 1 effort into the level 10 problem. And it broke my heart to see that. Here's another example where these people were very, very disciplined. You look at them and the guys, they're the type of people who had the discipline to wear a banana hammock on stage in front of strangers and, flex, and like, that's discipline. But you didn't have the discipline to bring the person, walk them through the gym, and then say, oh, and it's this much for a membership. Instead, you said, if you're interested, let me know. Like, you didn't have the strength and courage to ask for a sale. And so again, they were super disciplined in their exercise and nutrition, but they were not disciplined in their habits around growing their business. That definition came from that. And so if somebody wants to figure out how, okay, all right, I get it. I see where you're going here. I do have this big problem in my life and, I'm kind of working on it, but I could do more. Well, here's what we need to do. And I left this out of the book. I totally screwed up, Ginny. As I've been doing all these podcasts and people are asking a similar question, I'm like, I did not explain this in the book. Because in the book, I say, identify your level 10 problem, and then identify the level of effort you're putting into it. But that's kind of helpful, but it's not totally helpful. The good news is that the helpful part's really easy. And I use the example of my marriage. My marriage is my level 10 problem, not because it's bad, but because it's great, but I want to make it amazing. We have 3 kids under the age of 3, and anybody who has young kids know that, the kids take priority. And so the marriage, it's not like when you're newlywed, like, you are.
Yeah.
Is it a year now you've been married?
No, it's been just over 6 months. So
oh my gosh,
half yearly weds.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So, but anyways, so, your marriage is in the fire stage. And when people have, 1 kid, 2 kid, 3 kid, and they grow up, it's another thing to consider. So my marriage is a 9 out of 10 right now, but it's a priority for me to make an 11 out of 10. So my wife and I, we sat down and we made a list of 20 bullet points of this is what it would look like to put a level 10 effort into our level 10 problem. And here were the 20 bullet points on there. And it was everything from, reread the 5 love languages. And, I believe that's a great book for marriages, and, apply it. And then also, one of the things that we do and we make an effort to do is every night we have a date dinner. Now, this is different than what most people think of a date dinner. We eat dinner very early because of our kids. So we eat dinner at like 4:00. We have 2 nannies. So our nannies are playing with our kids pretty much beside us. But my wife and I get a 20-minute dinner together every night. Where we're able to connect and talk about things. And, she gets me to open up because I'm not much of a great communicator naturally. I am on podcasts. I'm great. I can talk everybody's ear off, but naturally I'm not. And so we make sure that happens every day. And then I cook dinner with her 5 out of 7 nights per week. And, there was like I said, there was probably 15 or 20 bullet points on that list. And we said, that's what it looks like to put a level 10 effort into your marriage. So now to everybody listening, we've identified what's your level 10 problem in your life. And again, it could be your health, could be your relationship, could be your financial situation, could be a business conflict, whatever. You know it, all right? And it's the elephant in the room. And, how do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time. So make that list of Like, here's what it would look like if this was not my problem, but it was my friend Joe's problem. And Joe came to me and said, hey, what are the things that I could do to fix this problem? You'd easily make that person a list and be like, Joe, just go and do these, 15 things. I know it's a lot of work, but you're going to go and do it. And then you got to do the same thing for yourself. And when you have that list, again, it's going to be scary. It's going to be intimidating because, somebody might have a problem. Somebody might be listening to this that's 200 pounds overweight. And listen, I'm not going to judge as to how you got here, but I know we can't stay here. And he might say, man, 200 pounds. I've helped people lose over 200 pounds in my previous fitness business. And, it doesn't happen overnight, but it's going to happen faster than you think if you commit to it and you do everything on that list. So commit to it. And then the next thing that I would do after that is I would 80-20 it, right? So maybe there's 20 things on that list. Well, there's going to be a couple of things that are going to have a bigger impact than everything else. So attack those. And eventually you will be putting that level 10 effort into your level 10 problem. You'll be a disciplined person and you'll get rid of that problem. And another problem will come around that you have to do the same thing for.
When you talk about, having that conversation with your wife and both of you agreeing collectively, okay, we're going to put a level 10 effort into, you want this marriage to be 11 out of 10, both of you. The reading the love languages, the making lists, on paper, Craig, it doesn't sound very sexy. It's not something you can Instagram. It's not something you can, live and
all the
stream.
good things you can Instagram.
That's what I mean. And I think like this level of discipline and this level of working on the hard things has been so, it's been made so to look so sexy and probably misleading as well on social media. Like you look at people working on, the ice baths, health hacks or relationship hacks that you see kind of broadcast over the internet. But the real hard work, it's not sexy at all. Getting up early, writing lists, having the hard conversations with your wife, sitting down, getting the nanny to keep the kids occupied so you can actually finish and listen to each other's sentences. All of these things, they're not sexy.
Yeah. So the hardest thing of all, the cool thing to do these days is to say, I do hard things and post that on the internet. And that goes with your ice bath, et cetera. The hardest thing of all for human beings to do, and it has been, probably since the dawn of time, is to think, right? So you got to take out the earbuds or AirPods or whatever they're called, not earbuds, and go into a room with no distractions and sit there and think on your number one problem. Like most people are not willing to do that, which is why they have so many problems, because that's a proactive approach to life. The reactive approach to life is to open up your Instagram and go to the explore page and see something where you're like, oh, I should go and do that too. And then go off and do it and then make a selfie video around it and post it on the internet so you can get some likes. But that's not a winning approach to life, unfortunately. And so the hardest thing of all is to step back, figure out exactly what you want in life, and then plot your course for that. And, forget about everybody else. But most people are too follow the crowd in nature and are doing things because, maybe it's that whole tribal thing. Maybe it's like we want to fit in with the tribe. And if we don't fit in with the tribe, we're going to get kicked out of the tribe and we're not going to survive if we're kicked out of the tribe and we're not in the cave with them and we're out here with the saber-toothed tigers and they're going to eat us. And therefore I can't be alone. So I got to do what everybody else does. Maybe that is so overriding in our brains that that's why we will go and do these things that don't actually serve us.
Craig, when you talk about, the real difficult things like taking a step back and being introspective, one way that you've really helped me is, and I've been thinking about this a lot more and more, especially after I've been married, is looking at what success looks like for me and what kind of a millionaire I want to be. Because the way that you have lived your life is not what I see on social media with billionaires and millionaires saying this is what we do, this is how we live. You see the people in the nice Range Rovers, they're in the nice Mercedes, they're flying on private jets, they're flying 40, 50 weeks out of the year. And then I look at my life, I'm like, that means 40, 50 weeks away from my wife. That means 40, 50 weeks on a plane. There's things that I don't want to give up in my own life that's going to take away time from my family here that I'm building or my life that I'm building here in New York. So I've really had to shift my definition of success. And you've done that really well too. You're like, this is my definition. This is my vision for my life. How did you arrive to that level of comfort to be like, I'm good with it. I'm good not having a Netflix show. I'm good not, having a reality TV show. How did you get to the point where you're like, I'm good? This is good.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I think it really does come down to knowing yourself. And when you know yourself, that's like one of the most important things. Years ago, I was a broke, struggling personal trainer in downtown Toronto. And I was fortunate enough that I worked for this gym where it was literally Canada's richest people would come in. And one of my clients, his brother was a lawyer in downtown Toronto on Bay Street, which is Toronto's version of Wall Street. And this was in like 2002. So to give you some context, because he said about his brother, my client, so his brother's a big, high-powered Bay Street lawyer, and he biked to work every day from this Forest Hill neighborhood. It was a long bike ride. And this is 2002, before anybody, no, people weren't really biking. People in New York were probably biking, but it wasn't really what it is today. And so he would have been looked at as like a very strange creature. But then my client said something that really stuck with me, and it's really one of my goals in life. And he said, yeah, he's just comfortable in his own skin. And I was like, whoa, man, like here I am, whether it was me bodybuilding or binge drinking or going out clubbing or buying, Nike shoes that I thought everybody liked, but I didn't like. I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. And if I could go back and, bestow upon everybody in the world something, I think that's like one of the greatest superpowers of all, is to be comfortable in your own skin. Because when you're comfortable in your own skin and you know yourself, then you can plot the course for your own race. And your own race in life has its own finish line. And even if it means like when you go and run your race that you're running in the opposite direction of everybody else, well, you're not going to get stressed out by it, because it's like, well, yeah, I mean, you guys go run that way, but everything that I want is over here. And I don't want what you guys want over here. And the model and mentor that we use for this in the book is Charlie Munger. And Charlie Munger was a fascinating individual. He lived to 99.9 years old, and he was a billionaire. He was Warren Buffett's mentor. He had everything that a man wanted, money, power, and respect. And yet he did none of the things that people would consider disciplined on the internet today. I mean, aside from reading a lot, he read a lot, and he didn't do much else, because their whole shtick was, Charlie and Warren's was, don't do anything, wait until the perfect opportunity comes, and then take advantage of it. And so they actually did way less. And they were often, in the 90s, when everybody was investing in tech stocks, they didn't buy any. And, maybe they should have bought some, but they didn't get ruined. And so, Charlie Munger is just so fascinating, because even in his 90s, he was a board member of Costco. And I read this story in another book, that he was a board member of Costco, and he would fly to the annual meetings every year in economy on Alaska Airlines. This is a guy who was worth over $2 billion. And he had a $30 wristwatch, and he used to buy these $50 shirts at Costco until he found equal quality somewhere else for $40. And he was so proud of this, that like, this is such a unique, strange individual in this world of wealth. And he lived in a nice neighborhood in LA, but his house was only 3,000 square feet. It wasn't enormous. But he had, wife, kids, money, power, and respect. And so I just think nowadays when people say, are you doing this? Are you doing this? I just run it through the Charlie Munger filter. I'm go, what would Charlie think of this? Because Charlie got to where he wanted to be, just like where, generally what I would want to be. And it wouldn't make sense to Charlie, it shouldn't make sense to me. And I can do that because I know what I want. I think about the future a lot, which is a double-edged sword, but I think about the future a lot, not just for me, but for my coaching clients and my family and everything. And so I'm always thinking about plotting and figuring out where we should be and what makes sense. And so I think that way. So I naturally think that way. And whenever I did something when I was younger, somebody gave me a Rolex once as part of a business thing. And I wore it once, and then I was like, no, this doesn't feel right. And I gave it to my brother-in-law, and he wears it. It was funny. My team asked me for a Facebook ad the other day, and they said, any status items that you have in your house, like a Rolex or something? I'm like, I don't have a car. I don't have a watch. I got children's toys. I got some Peppa Pig figures. I don't know how that's going to go over. So I don't have any status items to make these videos because when I've had them in the past, it just didn't feel right. And, God bless you if you're really into watches. I mean, I kind of wish I was into watches, but I'm not. And so I'm into books, and that's about it. And so for me, it was making that self-knowledge available and understanding myself. And then of course, like I'm human, so I can be tricked into wanting things sometimes when I go on my Instagram, but I get over it pretty quick because I can run it through that filter if it's right for me. And I'm not, dissuading anybody from owning the watch or certainly flying private. I would like to do that more often because I don't love airports and the airport security. But listen, if you are really into, like I have some friends who are really into sneakers, right? Like, God bless you. If that's your thing, go for it. If it really truly is in your core and matters to you. But if you're just doing it to keep up with the Joneses or to impress other people, that's eventually going to bite you in the butt.
That's true too, Craig, because I was thinking about this whole thing about flying first class, right? When I was a kid, we went on no trips on a plane. Like I think the first flight I took after immigrating to Australia was when I was 18, when we went back to Sri Lanka for a 2-week trip. That was the first time I ever set foot back on a plane. And then now thinking, okay, we're flying first class. And when I actually went to board the plane and I sat there, obviously my expectations were here. And when you fly first class for the first time, you get the cutlery, you get like the really nice food and everything. So your expectations are like, oh wow, the gratitude is at the whole time 11 out of 10, right? But then the other part of me is thinking like how we kind of measure success in these little moments. So you mentioned the Rolexes and the nice cars and the sneakers, and I'm talking about the flying experience. So what's important to me here? Experiencing this for the first time because I've been able to get here, or is it putting it on Instagram? And I think that's a fine line between where people sometimes struggle of, okay, I've gotten this success, but does success have to look like this? Do you think it's the first step, and this is a question I ask myself too, is going back to what you said, is it really checking in on what is important to me right now? Like what does this mean to me?
I think most people, like the only reason they do cold plunges is to make the picture to put on Instagram, because otherwise they wouldn't do it, I don't think. And so what's really important, if you were to actually step back and do the hard work of thinking and to write down the things that matter, and you were limited to 10, what would really get on there? And then the question is, how much time are you actually spending on that 10 versus how much time are you spending on other things and trying to impress other people with stuff that doesn't actually mean anything to you? And maybe it's just the age in me, right? Because I'm coming up to 50 and, I've been around the block a few times. And as you get older, generally people start to have a different perspective on maybe material items or certain even adventures and experiences and what really matters. And also because I have a young family, that again, the filter is so much stronger and helpful. But when I was younger, I definitely was doing things, I'm really glad that Instagram wasn't around when I was younger and first, getting started online and having my success, because I probably would have done stupid things, because I think that's just, something you have to learn the hard way about what doesn't matter. And also that it's just, the idea of standing out is just so darn attractive. If it wasn't, Instagram wouldn't exist. I think that's the bottom line.
I think that quote that you just said there, like you sometimes do have to learn the hard way about what doesn't matter and what does, unfortunately. And this is kind of a nice segue into my next question. Like you say, standards eat discipline for breakfast.
Most people, what they think discipline is like that white knuckling fight inside of you, that when there is something brought to you like chocolate cake at 7:00 at night and you're on a diet, that it's discipline is that thing that is going to be like this emotional roller coaster of you fighting it. But, that's an exhausting way to live. So instead of discipline, relying on discipline, we try and rely on standards. And standards are essentially these operating procedures that require no mental fatigue. So they're kind of like rules for your life. And I'll give you an example of how this is practical. So I used to be a binge drinker. And then after a binge drinking, I eventually was able to downgrade to social drinker. And then from social drinker, I was like once in a while drinker. And then in 2021, I became a never drinker. There's one night, it was just like, I had one drink. I was so tired. And the next day I was like, there's just no point. It's better to be 100% out than 99% out, is a quote that I like literally read the next day. And I was like, yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I've been a non-drinker for 3 or 4 years now. And that's my standard. I'm just not the type of person who drinks alcohol. Identity, standard, exactly whatever you want to call it. So let's say I go into a beautiful restaurant. Recently, I was in Whistler, the best bar that I've ever seen at a restaurant. Like, it was absolutely beautiful. I think the restaurant was called Wild Blue. It's a beautiful steakhouse, so many bottles of alcohol behind it. And if I would have been back in my social drinking days, I for sure would have had a drink. Now imagine that I'm with a social drinker, and it's me, the non-drinker, and me and a social drinker. And we go to a business event, and we both have to go to an event the next morning at 7 o'clock in the morning. And so we go, and all the people are there, and we were chatting with them. And someone comes up to the social drinker and says, well, to both of us, and says, hey, let's have a drink. And I say, my standard is, I don't say my standard is, but my standard is that, no, I'm a non-drinker. I don't drink alcohol. Thank you. Is there any decision fatigue there? No, it's immediate. There's no energy required. It's like Steve Jobs wearing the black turtleneck to all the Apple presentations. He wasn't like, oh, last time I wore a pink tuxedo, this time what am I going to wear this time? No, he's just like, I wear a black turtleneck and blue jeans, and I work on the presentation. That's where all the energy goes.
So the standard is kind of like a blueprint for your identity, essentially.
Exactly. It's like, if I don't have my phone with me, but what does your phone have? Your phone has an operating system that allows it to do the most amazing things. Now, the social drinker who's relying on discipline alone is sitting there going, oh man, I know I shouldn't, but all these people are peer pressuring me. I kind of want to, but I know I'm going to feel horrible. And it's like this internal battle takes so much energy from you that's why standards just beat discipline, because I can move on to the next thing. I can use my creativity on something instead of having my brain CPU, my computer operating system in my head, just devoted to trying to figure out whether I'm going to have a drink or not. And it's an exhausting way of going through life. You may need discipline and that type of willpower in some situations in life. But better than that are building effortless discipline systems. And when you have a system in place, it makes the right actions relatively automatic. And once you've done that and built your confidence and proved to yourself that you can follow the system and make the right decision, you start to shift your identity. And then eventually you build a higher standard. And a practical example of that is a lot of people go through life saying, oh, I can never be on time. And if you say that, you never will be on time. But let's say you want to shift that. Okay, so well, what are you going to do? Are you going to use discipline and willpower to be on time? No, because it's failed you in the past. So you need to set up systems. And simple systems would be like, okay, if I have to be there somewhere at 9 o'clock, I'm going to set an alarm on my phone for 8, 8:30, and 8:45, reminding myself multiple times that when the alarm goes off, check my alarm and the note says, hey, you have a meeting at 9, make sure you get there. And by setting those alarms, slowly but surely, I start to show up on time. Eventually, I start to be early. And the next thing you know, my brain starts to go, I can do it. I'm not always late. I can be on time. And now, as your brain builds that confidence and you make a promise to yourself and keep a promise to yourself, then you start to believe and you start to shift your identity from I can never be on time to I'm always on time. And then eventually to I'm always early. And then once you have shifted that identity, you no longer need the systems. You no longer need the alarms, because now you're just the type of person who's always early. And that's your standard. And that's the evolution that you want to have for all of your vices that you want to get rid of. That if you're a binge drinker right now, that eventually you can move to, I'm the type of person who only drinks when they want to, or who is a once a month drinker, or I'm just not a drinker at all. Whatever you want to get to, that's the path that you get there.
There's this resistance people have to discipline, to standards, to, holding a sense of, I guess, structure to their day, or kind of subscribing to an identity, or having like a blueprint for standards. It's because there is this, I guess, a mixed feeling or a misunderstanding of what discipline does to freedom and control. I mean, I believe you need discipline for freedom because it is the foundation. Could you walk us through what your beliefs are on that?
So let's say this person is resisting. I don't want discipline. I want spontaneity and this, that, and the other thing. And it's great. I don't want to suffer. Awesome. In the long run, though, the suffering is greater than the short-term suffering. So if you flip it around, if I put discipline in my life, if I put rigidity, if I put schedules, if I put structure in my life, my short-term life is going to suffer. Well, it's not suffering. It's sacrificing. Sacrificing and suffering are not the same thing. And so if you sacrifice now, you will benefit in freedom later on. But if you do not sacrifice now, you will suffer later on. So I saw this Instagram meme, and it was, the path to heaven is, or to a great place is really hard. And, the person was exercising and eating well. And then the path to hell is really easy. And the person was just sitting there, and they were, a glutton, and they were eating poorly. And that's a really good analogy, because we know that if you sacrifice and you don't eat junk and you don't become obese and you don't, abuse alcohol and drugs, that you will have a healthy later life in most cases. But if you are 200 pounds overweight, you're an alcoholic, you do drugs, and you eat poor food, you're going to end up in one of those motorized scooters. And that, that's a painful prison to be in, when you can't, you have your diabetes at 55 and heart attacks at 55. And so that is true. And the analogy is the same for us. If we don't control our days and put structure in our days, then we won't have the freedom in our evenings, or we won't have the freedom in our later years, and we'll forever be part of somebody else's system if we don't create our own systems. Every parent is told that your kids need routine. That's what every parent is told by, parenting experts. And it's true, because I have 3 kids. They're all, one's 3, one's 1.5, and one's 8 months. And so the more routine that we can give them and structure in their day, for when they go to bed, when they have their nap, what they eat, their play places that they go to every, on Tuesday it's this place, on Wednesday it's this place, the more security and calm it brings the child. And it's a better environment in which they can flourish and grow up. And I don't think any parenting expert would say, no, that's not true. You should, throw them in the backyard with a bag of chips and soda and let them eat whatever they want. Or like, no, nobody's going to say like, that's good parenting. Instead, it's structure and routine, because if structure and routine is good for a child, it's going to be good for the adult as well. The human body is meant for routine. It's meant to go to bed at the same time every night. It's meant to get up at the same time every day. And it's meant to generally eat the same things and exercise at the same time. Now, is that the most New York City, hedonistic lifestyle? No. But, if there's certain things that you want to accomplish, then that's a sacrifice, not a suffering, that one should make, so that you avoid future sufferings. Because I say that because I am a creative at heart. I am a writer. I've written at least 4 books, depending on what you want to call some of the other online stuff that I've created. And that really only could have been done through structure. And I'm a big fan of, I love reading, the days, even in the New York Times. It's like, what does the Sunday look like for, it's there's this little section where it's like, what does Sunday look like for this person? Like, somebody who works for Hamilton, or somebody who's, in PR or something. And it's really neat to look at their daily routines. And I loved reading about the daily routines of some of the most influential writers and composers, et cetera, in history. And they almost always did the same thing every single day. Even Stephen King, the horror writer, he got up and started writing at 9 o'clock, and he did not allow himself to leave his attic where he wrote his books. So when you're eating your Wheaties, Stephen King is up in an attic writing Pet Sematary. He didn't leave that room until 2,000 words were done. Okay, well, that's fine. But this was actually a painful thing for Stephen King, because he is a fanatic for the Boston Red Sox, right? Horrible thing to say to people listening in New York, but he was a fanatic Boston Red Sox fan. And many of their games started at 1 o'clock in the summertime as afternoon games. So Stephen King was under this pressure from 9 o'clock in the morning until 2,000 words were done, so he could go and listen to Boston Red Sox games. And this is a guy who wrote over 60, he probably has 80 bestsellers, because he followed a very structured formula. And you look back at, Dickens and Darwin and Tchaikovsky and all of these people in history, they mostly worked in the morning and went for 2 to 3 hour walks in the afternoon. Almost formulaic. And, there's something to that routine that set them free. And if you're an artist, I think the greatest freedom for you would be producing a great work. And if you don't produce a great work because you're out all the time and drinking all the time and hungover all the time and, living this, hedonistic freedom lifestyle, and you never get that great work out of you, that's probably the greatest suffering anybody could inflict upon an artist.
Yeah, 100%. You've shared so much wisdom here, Craig, and I want to I know we kind of talked about Instagram and how it being this dopamine hit for people to showcase, snippets of their life, but I want to kind of go through some tangible takeaways for our audience on discipline, because you are the world's most disciplined man. What's one discipline hack you think people should stop doing immediately?
Giving up the great to go for the good. So if there's something you're doing in your life that's good, but it's stopping you from doing something great. It could be reading a book a week is stopping you from writing the book that you've always wanted to write. And that's what you have to do. You have to go through the filter and figuring out what's not serving you and kick it to the curb.
What's a daily practice you still do to maintain your standards?
I still get up as early as possible before everybody else is up, because that's my time of day to be creative. And I do not miss that.
And what's the first sign someone is disciplined for the wrong reasons?
Probably that they're posting what they're doing on social media. If you're truly about what you're doing for discipline's sake and for your own goal's sake, it's probably not going to go on social media.
I feel so much better that you said that, Craig. I don't document half the things I'm supposed to. And I was thinking, maybe I should get a vlogger. And I'm like, do I want to go down that path? No, I don't.
I think that if you look at Instagram as like a person in its evolution and its aging, I think like it's past its adolescence, and stuff like that just doesn't hold the weight that it used to. And so you're probably saving yourself time and allowing yourself to focus. But I also think like the impact of it's just been done to death. And I don't know exactly what the future of Instagram holds and what it's going to be like as an adult in its adult phase. But I just don't think that stuff really moves the needle anymore. And the only time that I think it does is when it is a collaboration. So when it's this person and this person, now they're documenting their day together. Okay, well, that's different than what we saw in the past of people documenting their day. The documenting of the individual's day has probably been done to death. And unless you are going to put, double the effort, probably even more than double the effort to coordinate a day with somebody else, then it's just not worth your time doing it.